And what's so interesting is
Yeah, I
like,
think,
ideally, I think even those of us with the most packed birth bags, literal and metaphorical, should, if somebody were to walk in at a birth and watch the person who has the huge packed bags versus the person who is completely like oblivious and naive and hasn't really prepared at all, in some ways we should look like we're doing the same thing on the surface.
yeah,
We should both look like
right,
we're
exactly.
sitting there, we're holding space, we're knitting or just literally just being present
Hmm.
and giving her some encouraging words and giving her some water and
Yeah,
all these really basic things. It should look the same,
right.
but it's not the same because one person has all these bags that if they're required, she will be able to dip into them and retrieve what she needs and use it appropriately in the appropriate moment. Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth, rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share homebirth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year. From the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall of Rooted in Eden Private Contract Association,
And me, holistic doula and birthkeeper Brooke Collier of Sister Birth.
to choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all your decisions unto the Lord.
And to reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has already called good.
Please remember, birth is not a medical event, but a natural process. We are not your care providers, and this should not be taken as medical advice. Welcome to Holy Wild Birth. We have an episode for you today, just discussing when to use our tools as birth workers, when to reach into that tool bag and when not to, and how we know that, really. More of how we navigate what we are putting in and how we are using the tools we bring to the table. So I hope that you really glean a lot from this conversation. I do want to warn you that while we were recording, there was a little bit of delay to some of our audio. So there's a handful of spots where Brooke and I are talking over each other. They are short lived. We edited out as much as we could. Then the ones that were left were just simply would remove the meaning and content too much. So we left them. So please forgive a little bit of the overlap. In real life, we didn't realize we were talking over each other, but the track has set it in such a way that there are a few spots that's a little it's overlapped. So sorry about that, but I think that the finished product is something that you can separate it out enough. Well, again, I hope you enjoy.
Hi.
Hey,
It's been
excited
a
to be
while
back
since we've
in
been
the
in the studio
studio.
together, honestly. We've done
Yeah,
some episodes on our own with different guests and stuff. It's been a while since it's been just you and me, so I'm excited for this.
And me too. Me too. It's definitely good to be back and excited for this topic. I think it's definitely one that's more uh, pointed towards the birth worker for sure. But I still think there's going to be some good nuggets in here for contemplation for the mama, especially if you think about how you're picking the one who's serving you. So maybe like listen if you're the mama listening in, and birth work isn't necessarily pertaining to you, you can still, I think, glean some wisdom and some little nuggets for yourself as you think about why you would maybe want to have someone serving you and what role you want them to fill, and what their skill
Yeah.
set
looks like or doesn't look like, and all of that. So
Mhm.
even though we're
It
not
might even help you
speaking to
form
you
some
directly this
questions to
time.
ask the person you're
Right.
thinking about having serve you about what like her relationship is with her tools, things like that. So
Yes, for sure.
don't skip this just
So
because you're not a birth worker.
yes, absolutely. So with that said, I definitely think a hearth mother does have skills. I use that term, hearth mother, over even birth keeper or midwife or doula, or like, but just this like broader term of a woman, a wise woman serving from a place of Jesus, serving women as a call. And so I do think she has skills. And I think that is more than just hands-on skills too. Like, I think when people think birth skills, immediately they're like, can you handle a shoulder dystocia? Are you handling a hemorrhage? Like the emergencies. Like, for some reason, that's what we talk. It's like the skills of
Yeah.
emergencies, but like it's so much broader than that. The skill of being in a room well, of just being present and being a
Mhm.
you know, someone who can hear and see, and um, not make it about them, someone who
Yeah.
um, has good listening skills, who has good bedside presence, and is just what did you say, Billy Harrington? Is just a helpful human being. Has said it that way.
Yeah. A useful human
Um,
is what she says.
a useful human. That's it.
Mhm.
So, just being a useful human in general, through the prenatal period, through the birth and the postpartum, those tools there's definitely tangible ones, but there's also intangible. And, like, our tools that we might reach for aren't just the tools in our birth bag, but like the use of our hands and the use of um, philosophy and technique, and all of
Mhm.
those things. So, um, anyway, so I guess what we're talking about using our tools, we're also talking about like that skill set too. Um,
Mhm.
and just,
So yes, it's
I don't
things
know,
like the bag and mask you have in your herbs and your stethoscope and your blood pressure cuff. Sure, yes, those are tools in a more literal sense, but then we're also talking about some of those like more slippery tools that are a
right.
little more, yeah, just intangible and maybe invisible, but very,
Hmm.
very real, and definitely something that some
Yeah,
people
for
have more
sure.
of in their bag than others, and or a different set.
Right.
So their metaphorical tool bag, what's in
Right.
there, and both tangible and intangible.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And when you define it that way, it also makes me think about, just um, the way someone might be in a birth room using the things that they've learned, their tools, their skill set, and how that comes out. Like, especially thinking about just even on, an average doula or birth keeper site, set of tools, being like biomechanic stuff, being like,
Hmm.
okay, positions, and how often we reach for helping her into new positions because we see something, or we feel like, oh, maybe she needs to be in this position, or baby's in this position, so mom needs to move this way, or like, and it's just a really helpful being able to assess that and being able to know, but also when to not use that, when to allow the flow, and mom to sit back and watch those movements naturally occur, and watch mom, find that um, in her
Hmm.
own body, in her own intuition, and her, like, the baby's in her pelvis, so she knows how to move it, Um, so it's
Yeah.
that, like, and I think that's one that gets really overused often in the birth world, is, and one that I'm actually, like, I feel like I have a really good handle on that skill of when certain positioning is helpful, but it's knowing when not to use that, and to allow that
Hmm.
undisturbed process And it's actually one of my
Yeah.
favorite things to be able to like watch her and know in my head, oh, that means
um,
baby's here because she's doing that thing that I would do if I needed to get baby there. Like she's doing it automatic. You know, like it's such a beautiful
mhm.
thing to kind of see the skill set that I have not being needed. um
Yeah,
and yet
absolutely.
there being this like, you know, it's not that I'm not knowing how to do something that I'm not doing it, right? Like I'm not doing it because
Mhm.
it wasn't actually needed in that moment. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's
And you were
just
paying
such a cool
attention
thing
enough to know that you didn't need
to
that.
notice it.
And because
Right.
the danger can be with any tool that we have in any realm of our life is the tendency that because it's here, I want to use it. And
Mm-hmm.
then, but that's not always appropriate. Or, you know, that old saying, like, to the man who only has a hammer, everything is a nail. Like,
Mm.
if we have one skill set that maybe we're particularly strong on and zeroed in on, it's like our specialty and our niche, or something we have some strong opinions or feelings about, we might want to get that out when we see everything as needing it. Like,
You
oh, that
see it.
warrants me
Yeah.
using
You
that
see
skill,
it
and so does that,
everywhere.
and so does that, and so does that, when
Uh-huh.
that might not even be the appropriate tool for the thing that is happening in front of you. So there's also that discernment of knowing,
Absolutely.
does what's happening here even require this particular skill, let alone any skill at all?
Right.
Both. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It also makes me think about just the fact that like when you have a skill, just this like uncanny ability in ourselves to be like, I'm needed because I have
mhm,
skills. And so you start to like really step into this place of, well, why would, you know, like I was hired, so I'm here to use my skill. That's what I'm here for. I'm supposed to put it out on the table. I'm supposed to be using this. Versus no,
mhm.
you're supposed to have the skill. You know, like you came to the table with that because of your wisdom and knowledge and, you know, tools in the tool bag, metaphorical and literal, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll all be used at this time, you know. And I think sometimes it steps into that savior mentality
Yeah.
conversation within yourself. Like you have to have that and do that work. Be like, okay, yes, gain the skills. Yes, keep being a student and learn forever and continue to add to your tool bag. But that doesn't mean that you'll ever even need that tool. You know,
Mhm,
like you may garner that and it always be in the back corner, never used
mhm.
necessarily. So
And you can actually
I think
celebrate that
that
if that
that
happens.
takes
That's like,
humility.
great. I'm so
Yeah,
glad I
right,
never need to use my bag and mask, for instance. Like, I'm so
right,
glad I have never had to actually resolve a shoulder dystocia. That's wonderful. Instead of, it's also
right,
easy for me, I've noticed sometimes this tendency to feel like I have to prove that they made a good choice by asking me to
right.
be there, like by doing something. Like, the more I'm
By
doing,
doing
it more
something.
like, it's not true, but it can make it feel like I'm earning my keep almost. Like I'm showing them that it's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing they have me here. and I
Right.
usually can catch myself in that moment of like, no, that's not accurate. Like, back away from that. But I'm just putting that out there
Yep.
because I'm sure there's others who probably can relate to that. Um,
It
but
absolutely.
I'm
I
thinking in the hospital settings, we criticize, rightfully, hospitals for creating the emergencies that they then position themselves to heroically resolve. And it's
right.
something that we can be guilty of in a home birth setting too. And so we have to have the humility to recognize that we can do a version of that at home, and just being a birth attendant
Absolutely.
doesn't save us from that potential pitfall.
Yep. Such a human thing to do, really.
Mhm. Yeah, like, let me create this problem so I can showcase my skills. No,
Right?
that would
Yeah.
not be right.
And I don't think anybody's consciously doing it, but it's like,
No.
oh, I could handle that if that happened. So let's, you know, like, I don't know. It's just definitely a thing. But on that same vein of feeling like you have to prove yourself, I had a conversation not probably a couple months back, but with someone who was serving in the postpartum, and she was like, I have all these skills, but like she just wants to like share her birth story. Like she's doing a lot of processing and I'm just sitting there and I've made her some warm tea, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything. Like, what am I forgetting to do? Because I'm just sitting on her bed. Listen, I'm like, that's the
Right.
work. That's what she needs right now. And
Mhm.
sometimes you're doing so much by not doing anything, you know, quote unquote, but like that
Mhm.
presence is such it's so needed to our souls, like for
Mhm.
to be seen and heard and known. um and that's such a value in pregnancy and birth and in postpartum. And I think if we realize that and we can recognize that, you know less is more when it
Mhm.
comes to this whole childbearing year. um
Mhm.
that that is the benefit. That is what you're bringing. You are coming in to this space knowing that, and then walking it out, and like that is earning your place in that birth team, because you've honored where you're seeing her.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, like the quality of your presence too, not merely that you are a body in the room, but
mhm,
the quality of your presence, which is contributed to
mhm,
by such things as your own life experience and the work you've done inside yourself to be a healthy person and your
right,
ability to hear the Spirit of God and to know the art of holding space. You're not replaceable because Aunt Sue can't necessarily bring that quality of presence. Maybe Aunt Sue could come sit on
right,
the end of your bed, but if she doesn't get it, if she's doesn't have the
mhm,
quality of personhood, um,
right.
it's not the same. So
Yeah,
so when we
if
say
she came to hold your
presence,
baby, not to see
yeah, she
you.
wants to just hold your baby and like ignore everything that you're going through. And when you try to tell her your birth story, she's like, "Oh well, then my birth story, and it's a good thing I was at the," and then they take it off and make it about them.
Yeah.
Like, so, so when we say presence,
Yep.
we're talking about like
Yep.
it's the quality of your presence, not just your body being there. So that is
Mhm.
an important tool in your tool bag that we have to always be cultivating, is that being the kind
Yeah.
of person who knows how to occupy those
Mhm.
spaces with grace and
Yeah.
um, just carrying. I don't like to use the word energy because it sounds so woo woo, but you know what I mean? Like you can feel the way
Yeah.
somebody, when they come into the room, there's a certain kind of feeling in their wake. And I just always
Yep.
want to be the kind
There
of person who
is.
brings feelings of safety and grace and acceptance
Mhm.
and understanding and the scent of Jesus.
Yes, the scent of Jesus. Love that. Yeah, I think that it's so easy to like when you're in that role to not realize you're working, you know, and like that you're not
Hmm.
doing anything because you're just being yourself. If you've cultivated these skills, you naturally do them in and out of the birth room, right? Like you start to just be present for people in your life. Like I remember it shifting, learning those kinds of things shifted the way I parented and the way I was present with my own children. Like it just became a part of who I am now.
Hmm.
And just becoming a better human, really. And so
Yeah.
when you're in that space and you're sitting on that bed and you're absolutely using that tool, you,
Mm.
you're it's easy to be like, oh, I didn't do anything because I was just being me. But like, that's of value, and that is a wisdom and a skill that you are bringing. And so, um, yeah,
Hmm. So, and like philosophically, people, so all birth workers have an actual birth bag, right? That has items in it, physical, tangible
hmm,
items. And
yeah,
each one of those items has usually philosophy behind it about what's helpful and
sure,
what's not helpful in a birth, what may or may not be used. And you'll find the range of things from people who carry in like 3 huge duffel bags full of things, or like lots of stuff, like they're moving in, and other people who have like a tiny little backpack, like
yeah,
really minimalist. And those are just the physical
hmm,
items, but um, But then there's also those intangible ones, and it's worth thinking about, like, how much stuff do I have in my invisible bag as well. Um, and I've
Right.
noticed that there is kind of like some camps out there, I guess, in birth attendants right now who almost willfully kind of want to refuse to learn about and carry
Anything?
tools, both
Yeah.
physical and intangible ones, because they have this conviction almost that, like, to bring them would be to call in the problems,
Right.
um or because philosophically they just believe birth always works, we can trust it, and so we just always have to stay out of the way, to the point where I'm not even going to be prepared with anything, because nothing bad is going to happen as long as I sit here in a place of trust. um
Right.
and like I've told Lauren, I've wrestled with this a little bit, because it's true that in some ways willful ignorance it makes it easier to show up to a birth in a place of relaxed, easy breezy trust, because you don't you don't know what could go wrong, so you're just like, oh, I'm at a birth, this is
Right.
exciting. um
It's so
but
pretty. Yeah.
is it a good idea to willfully kind of, I'm not saying it's bad to be a minimalist in what you bring to birth, I'm pretty minimalist, but with physical items. But like, what about this extreme version of, let's just pretend the tools aren't needed at all, so we're not going to have them or learn about them? I'm like throwing the ball to you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Take it.
No, I think that there's a level of integrity that comes into question when you're going to a place. If you have presented yourself to this woman and maybe you haven't, like, but I think there's a level of integrity that you have to have an open line of communication with these women that you're serving on what skills you have and don't have. But if you're going to call yourself something, whatever title you're picking up, like, do you have a comparable set of skills, tangible and intangible, that she would expect to fall into that title? Um,
Mm-hmm.
like, if you're calling yourself an authentic midwife, do you have the skills of midwifery? If you're calling yourself a doula, do you have the skills of a doula compared to the other people that she would maybe, like, if you're calling her, that's what she's expecting, like, are you having those conversations? So this
Mm-hmm.
is what I believe that title means, and this is why I use it, and this is the skills I have and don't have. I think that that's really about transparency and
Mm-hmm.
being truthful in how we're representing ourselves. Because it does really bring into question, like, if you're calling yourself a midwife, but you've never, you've taken no real time and effort to learn the birth process and things that can go wrong, and be able to identify them and keep a woman stable, and and guard life. Like, if you don't have the skills to guard life, should you be calling yourself a midwife? Like, I really push back that you can, but I think it also has to be between that birth attendant and that woman that she's serving, and if they're both in agreement of what skills she
Mm-hmm.
needs and what she's bringing to the table, and all those conversations have been had, then call yourself whatever you want. To me, it's more about the integrity of what is she expecting you can do, and have you had those conversations? Like, um,
Yeah,
but I
absolutely.
do think, I think about, what is it in Proverbs 22? The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go
Mm.
on and suffer for it. And so, like, there's a level of, like, you can be prepared and prepare yourself. I think is a huge part of just moving um in integrity, and we can have, like, we don't have to be in fear to say, I bring up that scripture because I don't think you have to be in fear to be like, oh, that's danger, I should, like, I'm responding. We can respond to things and know things, versus just being simple minded, as that scripture would say, and be like, yeah, well, just do whatever, like just gonna throw myself off a cliff because God said his angels will carry me, right? Well, no, that's Jesus actually spoke against what Satan said then, like not to test our God because we just think we can, you know, do whatever. We still live in a fallen world, and physics still applies. And if you throw yourself off a cliff, you will fall. um,
Right.
so
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing you say there's like two parts to that. Technically, at the end of the day, as long as the woman you're serving and you yourself have had a conversation in which you got specific about her expectations and needs and what you're bringing to the table, and both parties are okay with it, then that's your freedom and your choice to like, that's great. As long as you're matched
yeah,
up, it's good. um, and on the other hand, in general, it's probably wisdom to know how to see danger and hide yourself in the birth
yeah,
space. Yeah. And what's so interesting is
yeah. I
like,
think
ideally, I think even those of us with the most packed birth bags, literal and metaphorical, should, if somebody were to walk in at a birth and watch the person who has the huge packed bags versus the person who is completely like oblivious and naive and hasn't really prepared at all, in some ways, we should look like we're doing the same thing on the surface.
yeah,
We should both look like
right,
we're
exactly.
sitting there, we're holding space, we're knitting or just literally just being present
Mm-hmm.
and giving her some encouraging words and giving her some water and
Yeah,
all these really basic things. It should look the same,
right.
but it's not the same because one person has all these bags that if they're required, she will be able to dip into them and retrieve what she needs and use it appropriately in the appropriate moment.
Yeah, I'm the person who has the big bag. Like I have such a big bag, and I hardly ever open them though. But that's kind of who I always have been. Like there's a level of personality to it as well. Like there's absolutely philosophy, and like why you would want to have something. But I'm also just such a like I like the new gadget and like the having the stuff too. And I don't know. It's actually funny because um, when I was in indie birth, Marin and Margot, very much same birth philosophy, but one is minimalist and one is maximalist. And and I just find myself I'm more
Mm-hmm.
of a maximalist as far as like my bags, um, and I don't love carrying in a ton of things, so I like keep refining and refining to try and make it easy to carry in the things that I want to carry in. But like even when I do, rarely do I even open it at all. And so I've actually set up my bag now to where like the things that I almost always will grab or reach for quickly, or the first things that I would end up going to if I did reach into my bag, is in its own little small bag that goes into the big
Oh,
bag.
smart.
And so I take that
Yeah.
out at the birth. So like the big bag's in there, but like, and it all can come in one, but like that just comes out. And I can largely leave the rest of it like even in the other room, and not
Yeah.
in her birth space. But like, it's funny to me how much stuff I have as far as like tools, both continually learning, continually growing. I'm always taking a course. I'm always reading a book. I'm always learning more things and adding things, metaphorical and literal. And yet I am absolutely the midwife that doesn't touch any of it, like unless I absolutely have to. But it's not because I'm not doing nothing because I don't know how to do something. I'm doing nothing because I realize that
Mm-hmm.
that is the something that needs to be done.
Yes. Nothing is the something that needs to be done the vast majority of the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well said. It takes a lot of self restraint to do that, to
It
be like,
does.
yeah, I have all this stuff
Oh,
and it's okay if it just sits there and never gets touched. Because if you're like me, once I've invested in
Mm-hmm.
something, I want to use it.
I
Like
want to use it.
I
Yeah,
paid good
for
money for
sure.
that. Or I put good effort
And
into
you
that.
start
So
to
I want
see
to
it.
I want to put it to use.
Right. Yep.
But saying
And
it's
you
actually
start to see
okay
it
if my
too,
investment in that is technically wasted, but not wasted anyway.
Right. I
Yeah.
hear you. And I think it's interesting um how often I find myself like the Lord brings something to my plate and I learn that, and like at the next birth I do need it. And it's like, oh wow, okay.
Mm,
Was that needing it because I saw it now? Or was that needing it because he
mm,
prepared me? But I really firmly believe
mhm.
in like he equips the called. And I've seen it all through my student years and in my now midwifery years where he truly preps me before um, that next birth that I'm going to need something. And then on the flip side, I also will, like, oh no, I felt need, I keep shoulder dystocia, it keeps coming up. And then I got this book and it had stuff in there about shoulder dystocia that I didn't know about. And then I took this little course and all of a sudden it's coming up. And then I'm like, does that mean I'm about to face a shoulder dystocia? Like,
Yeah.
no, we're not gonna, like, then you have to, like, I'm just growing my tool bag. That's okay. I don't have to expect it just because
Hmm.
I'm learning it, but like to be open to the fact that he does prepare me. And so it's such a weird little balance to be in, that you're not,
Yeah.
bringing in this assumption or an expectation that she's going to need this new skill that you're suddenly seeing everywhere. Um, but even how can that be, like there's probably something in it that you needed to learn in that time, and that's okay. And you might be using it less obviously. I don't know if that makes
Hmm.
sense, but like I think about one time that was a kind of talking from a real situation that kind of happened with the shoulder dystocia stuff. Then I got to this birth and the pushing phase was really long, and I was like, oh no, what is that, like, is that what's happening? Is that why he was preparing me and why I have all this new information I hadn't thought about before in regards to shoulder dystocia? And then, to where I was finding myself almost expecting to have to use those new skills. And yet instead, yes, she did need some assistance, but it wasn't shoulder dystocia. It was largely positional and like body. But because of the things I had learned about shoulder dystocia, I had a new understanding of the pelvis, a deeper understanding of it, I guess. And it was like I used that new information not in the way it was presented. Does that make sense? Like it was like
Yeah.
it opened my eyes to a new way of not doing anything. um,
Hmm.
so I didn't have to use the skill in which they were presenting that information through. Um, but it was helpful nonetheless. So I don't know if that made any kind of sense.
Yeah. No, it definitely
Okay.
did.
It's
Yeah.
like such
That's a
a,
really cool example,
a
actually.
nuanced thing to try and explain. Um, that just
Well,
because
you
you
thought
learn
you
it
were
a
learning
certain,
about
like you learn
specifically
this
how to resolve shoulder dystocia, but in learning the steps of resolving the shoulder dystocia, you learn things about the pelvis and positional stuff that ended up coming in handy at this birth, even though there wasn't a dystocia,
in a
because there was
different, yeah,
aspects
in a different manner,
of
right?
that pathway to
Yeah.
learning the dystocia that applied. Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
not always a
Thank you for
one-to-one
wording that
correlation.
well.
Like, yeah,
Exactly.
just
Yes.
trying to
Thank you
say, I hear
for
you. I'm trying
for
to paraphrase it back to
refixing
you.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great example.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a way that we can, as we are learning skills, we can show up, knowing that it can be that situation, it can be similar to that situation where just because you've prepared doesn't mean that you have to now assume it's going to happen or like, be on
Hmm.
guard in a way that is fearful, like where you're okay, I now understand, um, you know, how hemorrhage happens. that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to be fearful of the third stage, right? Or
Right.
get to
Mm-hmm.
where I think that's such a common thing in this area of the birth world in like my region. There's so many midwives that were raised up by the same midwife, and so it's like this. There's such a fear of the third stage, and like you'll be at
Mm,
beautiful, peaceful, perfect birth, and then the third stage happens, and it's like there's just such a rush to get the placenta out because if they don't get the placenta out, she's going to hemorrhage, and and like and just that it's just there, and there's this tension, and you're like, even if she doesn't do anything on it, like all of a sudden she's tense, and so she's panicked. So then everybody else feels the panic, and like I don't know, I've seen it so many times
yeah.
in the
Mm,
in various births attending with other midwives. Um, and I'm like, just because you know the skill and know what can happen doesn't mean we have to live in that fear. Um, like have the information, know
yeah.
it, but
Which this
like
tips into what could
I don't
be an
know.
entirely other
I don't
podcast
feel. I
episode
don't
about
think.
the role of
Yeah.
trauma in a midwife's life too.
Hmm. For sure. And I think sometimes it's even like
Um,
passed down trauma.
like if you have
Like
this
when
unresolved
you think
trauma, you're
about
gonna treat
mid.
every person after that as if they're about to have the same disaster happen to them that you just witnessed at another birth. So
Right.
there's that interplay.
Yep.
Sometimes our past traumatic experiences impact how we interact with our tools and how often we think we need to use them
Hmm.
if we're not dealing
Yeah.
with it, right?
It,
Like if we're not dealing with it.
it's true. It's absolutely true. And then we can teach that to our students or to those around,
Hmm.
like you pass that on. Um, and so it's like you start doing things because it's required, even though you only learned it because that person had trauma. So like now you don't have the trauma, but you're still acting in that manner because you were taught to fear that
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that that's such a huge part of that. Like why are you obtaining these skills? Are you obtaining this skill because you're afraid of birth? Maybe you should be working on that first. um, then,
Yeah.
I think sometimes the heart of why you want to learn more can be a huge part of this, because like I feel like I don't really struggle too
Mm,
much with like needing to use the tool I learned about. Um, but I think maybe that's why I'm learning just because I love to learn and because I'm curious and because I want to see and uncover more of God's design. And I adore that. And so that's why I continue to learn. But if you're constantly learning from a place of I need to be prepared for the next emergency, like if you're putting together your tool bag from that place of fear of, well, I might
yeah.
need that, I need to have it, versus I just love learning this and I want to know more. I think that is going to end up informing how you go about using it. Like if you felt like you needed it for an emergency, I
Hmm.
think you're probably going to be more apt to reach for it um,
Hmm.
sooner than you needed it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that taking that time to self-examine what is driving the selection of my tools or the acquisition of my
Mm-hmm.
tools is a really important part of the process. Mm-hmm. That's good. So
So,
let's jump ahead for a minute and say your tool bag is
yeah,
packed and you're at a birth. And then how do you know when to pick things up? I love the thing you've shared with me before, the 3 thought rule. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? I think that's such a lovely guideline as a starting place.
absolutely. 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 So, this came from Emily Graham. She was a teacher when I went through indie birth midwifery school, and so it was pretty sure it was in a lesson in there. It may have been like a side webinar somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure it was in the midwifery school lesson when she was teaching there. Emily Graham is a midwife. She's also the star of These Are My Hours, that birth documentary. So like if you've not seen that,
Love
please go
that
watch
one.
that. It's amazing. But anyway,
I love it.
this is the woman that came from. And it was essentially the three thought rule is you don't do anything with unless you've thought it three times. So in practice, that might like, oh, I think I've noticed that she hasn't drank anything in a while. Okay, I've thought it once. Like, so it can be something as minuscule as we know how important hydration is, that we need to keep her hydrated and help her in that, and um, but also she has thirst, and it's gonna come up naturally for her as well. And so, to be in an undisturbed birth, we're not disturbing her intuition and her natural instinct. That's what we want her to be in her, you know, in her reptilian brain, in her instinctual space as much as possible. And so, as we knowing that she is very vulnerable. A woman in birth is very suggestible. As soon as you suggest something, they can agree like just immediately because they're just so open. Like that's the whole point of birth, is to open up. And as they're opening up physically and emotionally, that also makes them very vulnerable to suggestion. And so this three thought rule is like, I'm not going to suggest anything unless I really feel like this needs to be suggested. And so you can kind of self insurance with this. Okay, I've thought it once. All right, awesome. I'm going to hold that, recognize that I've thought it. Then I'm going to be like, okay, am I watching for her to take that drink? She still hasn't taken a drink. And now I'm realizing she still hasn't taken a drink. It's come up a second time. And I'm thinking she looks a little parched, and I'm okay. Second time, I'm holding that. I'm not responding to that. And then the third time, I still notice that she hasn't gotten a drink herself. And I'm still thinking, it's been a minute since she had a drink. And then I'm going to actually, lift up that straw cup to her and just hold it. I don't have to say anything. I can still not disturb the
Mm-hmm.
process and just show her the drink and see if she reaches for that, if she, turns her head to take a sip. So it's that making sure it's come up three times for myself before I ever interject myself in her process. And I find, especially with the Lord, like he knows this rule for myself, that I've set this, that I'm not going to act unless I've thought it three times. And I have literally been in a situation where I needed to act pretty quickly. And I've heard the Lord say something to me three times back to back. And I'm like, okay, got you. Like I heard, okay. Like he's like, I know that you're not going to respond until you've heard it three times, And so he'll say something just, I'm like, okay, I understand, like that's become a thing with him and I, that he honors that three thought rule for me. And so sometimes it is that back to back to back, that I think it or I hear it from the Lord. And sometimes it's like, okay, if she needs that drink, and as soon as I think it, she gets it herself, and I didn't need to interject myself
Mm-hmm.
into that. Or I'm thinking that like, she's really seeming like she's stuck in that, like moving from active to transition, and there's that like place of her rhythm has shifted and she's like trying to find her way, and you want to be able to be like, oh, let's move into this position, it might be easier. But instead just waiting, and then she finds her way herself. And again, it's just like I could sit back and, instead of interjecting the position change I knew she needed, watch how she finds it so beautifully, herself. So I think it's just like insurance against, disturbing a process.
Yeah. Yeah. Since you shared that with me, I've been I've adopted it, and it's pretty cool. It's really helpful, really practical way to kind of slow down
Yeah.
and make sure, that you're really disturbing, or in a way that's truly beneficial and necessary and timely, instead
Mm-hmm.
of just like
Yeah.
randomly or impulsively. So, and for me,
Yeah.
honestly, I tend
Absolutely.
to be too slow to speak up or too slow to say something. So the three thought rule has kind of sometimes sped me up. Like, oh, okay.
Mm.
Maybe it is
I keep
time to
thinking
bring
this. Yeah.
out some of my
Yeah.
skills. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of
Yeah.
continuing to doubt
It
myself and
definitely,
think, I better sit with this longer and longer and longer and longer and longer because I don't want to interrupt her. And then really it would have been beneficial if I had used something that I have within myself.
yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think I've experienced it that way as well, for sure, to where I'm like, oh, maybe like, I'm thinking about checking in on baby, as a midwife, going, okay, I should check heart tones. And then I'll wait, and like if it keeps coming up, I'm like, okay, it's definitely time, and I don't push it off anymore because I've thought it 3 times. I need to check on that baby. Um, so that's kind of how I can
Hmm.
use it practically, um, to make sure I'm not too hands off in a situation that does require some of the skill I might
Yeah.
have brought to her. Which I think reminds
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
a while back there was that, not to throw you out there, but you were talking about that. You were like, I think it was a virtual situation, so you were kind of talking to me at the
Hmm.
same time, or maybe it was into the birth keeper group, the Believing Birth Keepers group, and you were saying like, I think she really needs to move positions, but I'm afraid to like suggest that because I don't want to like mess up her flow. And I think I said something along the lines of like, don't deprive her of the wisdom that she hired you for. Like, you're noticing something, you brought that, like, don't deprive her of it because you're
Yep.
afraid of some ideal of, not messing with that. And I think sometimes you can see it that way, like, wow, I'm
Mhm.
depriving her of something. Okay.
Yeah.
that
Yeah, that was a significant moment for
that
me. I
can
was
be really
like,
helpful.
dang, okay, that's convicting. And so I did speak
Oh.
up, and she did do the thing, and then the baby was born.
And the baby
So
was
I was
born.
like, okay, that's how that works. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
good teachable moment for
So
sure.
it's that
Mhm.
that honoring what you have brought, what you can bring to the table, is just as important and beneficial, as leaving the bag packed up too. So it's definitely, they're so nuanced, and it's
Yeah,
such a
absolutely.
it's
That's a
not
great
black and
point.
white,
And so it's good to know
by any
yourself,
means.
right? Like
There's
some of you as birth workers are going to
Mhm.
be more prone to being too hesitant, and others of you are going to be prone to being too in there. Um, and so you have to know
Mhm.
your kind of your own starting point, like which way do you tend to err if you're going to err, and um, then kind of taking the concepts we're talking about here and applying it in whichever direction makes sense for your particular
Yeah,
orientation, I guess. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. But the default in
So
general is to
the
do
other
nothing. So it's like, again, coming back full circle to that,
Mhm.
the general rule of thumb is the less you do, the better. And I think that's pretty across the board, a pretty good general starting place to not underestimate, to
Yeah.
not undervalue the power of your nothing and your quality of presence
Mhm.
while holding these
Absolutely.
bags of tools and um, in the balance of not anxiously feeling fretful that they should be utilized, but just knowing that quiet confidence that you can reach for them and use them appropriately if you need to.
Absolutely. I think that, um coming into that space of like, okay, I have a tool. I've thought it 3 times. It's time to use said tool. Figurative, literal, whatever we're talking about. It's time to step in and do that, and or use that. I think that it really helps to use the way of the hearth mother. And this is really
Mm-hmm.
the heart of I um, why I mapped out this model. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about, we did a podcast on the way of the hearth mother, so I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that. It'll give you a little bit more understanding of what I'm talking about next, but without rehashing what the way of the hearth mother is. Essentially, that this conversation is one of the reasons I mapped out those steps, right? Like, so that you could have a really clear way of being and responding, and or not responding to a certain situation. The real key in facilitating well in the birth space is the first step is prayer and worship, right? Like the first step is all about him being Lord of your life and on the throne fully. And the second step is about waiting on him, resting in him, which isn't necessarily, sometimes it is a physical resting, not doing anything, doing nothing. But sometimes that rest is more of a heart posture, right? That's about you sitting at at his feet. And so in a birth space, if there is time to respond, you're not being able to like, okay, I'm going to go take a 30-minute intercession break. And, you have to
Yeah.
have already done steps 1 and 2. You have to come into that space having lived your life in the constant 1 and 2 is happening all the time, right? So that you can readily be in step 3, which is get curious. So like your mind is able to be in this place of curiosity, and you're always listening for the one who has all the information, because you've been in step 1 and 2. You're rightly ordered, where he's Lord of your life and he's leading and guiding, and you are resting in him and waiting and watching for him to guide you. So you're postured to hear those answers, to be guided, to be equipped before you were even in that room. And then that get curious step for me really is, I was talking about this with my midwifery students recently, actually, about what it was as she was navigating being a assistant stage versus being the primary midwife. And she was struggling in that, how to step over, like, where's the midwife mind at? And she was like, I noticing the problem, but I don't know what to do next, even though she knows the tools. She was like, I haven't, like, where do I go there? And so it brought up this conversation of like, I think you need to live in that silent place of when a midwife is doing nothing, she's also being curious. She's observing, she's watching and asking questions. So when you notice this thing that came up in that birth that we were talking about with her, I was debriefing, she was like, what were you thinking about? What were you asking yourself when you saw that issue arise? What were you asking yourself what could be the possible reason? Getting really curious in a situation of like, okay, I don't know, like, there's blood. Where's that blood coming from? Is it too much, or non-consequential, like it doesn't matter, right? Is it coming from like a placental abruption? Is it coming from a cervical tear? Is it just her cervix is opening in this one? Like, is this a normal amount of blood, or is this an actual issue? And like, there's only going to be 2 places that it really comes from. So if you can rule those out, then you're fine, and then how would you rule those out? And like following this line of questioning, that you could get curious and begin to know, once you answer those questions internally or gather the information you need to answer those questions, at that point, that's how you can then know that you confidently reach into intervention steps further along the way of, okay, this really is something I need to intervene in. Or I've been curious enough that I can realize that, yeah, there was a deviation in this process of normal, but it's not interfering with the birth, so I don't have to do anything, right? Like,
Sure.
sometimes there is a deviation and it's like, this isn't quite normal, but also baby's fine, mom's fine, there's nothing, everything's progressing, just
Yeah.
so there's nothing I need to do, even though this feels different. Then you're just learning a new variation of normal, versus this is a deviation and it is interfering with something, and there is a issue, and now I can help reach for a tool because I've gotten curious well enough, and I've asked some good questions, and I've gathered enough good information internally, in that place of prayer, in that place of being present and being able to do nothing because you're doing something internally, that you can then know, okay, it is time to reach for step 6 or 7 or 8, which are our intervention steps. The first 5 are
Mm-hmm.
all living as designed, essentially, getting up to
Yeah.
that, like maintaining normal, healthy. Um, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're not wanting to reach into 6, 7, or 8 unless you've done those really well.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks for applying the way of the Hearth Mother to like that kind of specific scenario. It's such a helpful tool, you guys. I'm so grateful that the Lord entrusted that to Lauren, and do listen to the episode if you haven't. And also if you are a birth worker listening to this and this kind of like is just clicking with you and you want more of it, just please know that our program, the Way of the Hearth Mother, is a birth keeper and doula training program, literally hanging on the scaffolding of the Way of the Hearth Mother, so that by the time you're done with it, you know it inside and
Yeah,
out and have explored deeply every step of it and know how to like live that out, not just in birth, but in your life. So I just want to make sure you guys know that
yeah,
that's something that's out there for you to look into. We'll put the link in the show notes. And I didn't plan to say that, but it just seemed appropriate. So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it is such a helpful model for myself in my life and in birth work as well.
hmm,
Um, but it definitely does. It
yeah, like
applies
in
to
parenting, in
just
like
the,
everything.
yeah, in everything. Yeah, it's literally everything. In how I walked through my own pregnancy, as a mom, wondering when it was time to do something, when it's time to help your child with the sniffles, or like when it's time to how to make a big life decision. Like it just, in
Yeah.
our finances and our marriage, like I use it all the time because it's not really even a tool. It's just a philosophy of like order. Like, okay, what's the right next step?
Yeah.
Well, this is how I find it, and has that space um to live in the nuance and to know when to act and when to not
Mhm.
act. And so I don't know, it's such a gift I feel like I was given. And being able to just share that. And I love that we've got that course out there now. And I think that hopefully it really impacts these women's lives even far past um, their birth work.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even if you graduate from Hearth Mother Journey and don't become a birth worker, I feel like you still would not be walking away empty handed by any stretch of the imagination. You're still, it's like you just got a discipleship program and this like toolkit for your whole life. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely,
Not to plug it too hard.
absolutely.
I don't mean to feel like
Not
I'm
as
advertising here, but truly, I just genuinely feel that way.
it's something I don't know. I feel like I can't. It sometimes I forget it's mine. If that makes any kind of sense, I'm like, this is
Sure.
such a cool tool God gave me.
Yeah, well, I think that's because you do have that attitude of like the Lord entrusted you with this, not that it was like sourced out of your own brilliant brain, you know? So you have that humility around
Right.
it that allows you to almost forget that it's yours, you
I'm
know?
like, you just everybody, yeah, like everybody needs this. It's so good. Like it just is how it
Mhm.
shifted my life so much.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like it was
Yeah.
so much, so many years of being taught how to live that way, really with lordship, Jesus as Lord of my life and guiding every next step. Um, and then he just kind of gave me a framework to put it in, So
Mhm.
it really is all about him. And so that feels like I want to shout it from the rooftops, him, not
Yeah.
necessarily
Yeah.
this method that I created, quote unquote. It's more about just
Mhm.
yeah. I
Yep.
just want to shout about how life changing having this practical way of letting him lead your life.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So it does really apply so well to the specific conversation we just had here too. But
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So hopefully this
Well,
episode
it
kind
was
of
a really
helps
good
a little bit
conversation.
as you just engage with your questions about your toolkit and what you have in it and how you use it and how you let the Lord guide you in how you use it. And if you have feedback, please drop a little, comment if you're listening on Spotify, or email us if you want to, if something really struck you. We love to hear feedback. But
Yes,
do you want to
and
pray us out,
amen.
Lauren?
Absolutely. Precious Jesus, thank you. I thank you for even just what we were already bragging about you uh, on this Way of the Hearth Mother model. I thank you for just whether we use that terminology or that model specifically in our life, Lord, I just thank you
Mm-hmm.
that you guide us. I thank you that you are always the one who directs our steps, that you are the light upon our feet. And I just ask that you would continue to do that, that you would continue to remind us that you do that in our life. And as we serve women, that you would just be ever present, that you would give us direction and wisdom and strategy, that you would give us the grace and the peace to do nothing when that is all that is called for, and that
Mm-hmm.
you would give us the grace and the peace and the skill to act when we are called to act in small ways and in large ways, Lord. We thank you that you are always in the birth room, that you are ever present with woman, and you see us and you hear us. And I just thank you for being a God who sees us. I thank you for being a God who leans in and picks us up and holds us and guides us. And um, I'm just so thankful for you, Lord. You are everything. You are our skill set and tool bag. You're the only tool I ever want to reach for, Lord, is you. That I might be, as Brooke so eloquently said, the son of Jesus. Um, Lord, I want to be your hands and your feet, and I just ask that you would help us all to answer that call, to being your hands and your feet in all of the birth rooms that you call us to. In Jesus'
Mm-hmm.
name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.